still going to be with development in 2025, and that hopefully will be that person that will obviously is currently doing the police complaints, and that's why there's been some delay to that. The prison amendment number 8, Jersey, create a system of post-custodial supervision of people leaving prison. Further consideration was required, and that's still included in the 2025 legislative programme. Stalking and harassment law, obviously that's one of the VOG recommendations to develop that. That's still scheduled for delivery within this term of government, as is the domestic abuse amendments under the VOG, the non-fatal strangulation, the intimate images abuse law, and then following that, criminal procedure law amendments. That's again still scheduled for this term of office, and the Criminal Justice Young Offenders Jersey Amendment 20 is also scheduled probably for either Q2 or Q3 of 2025. So that's basically...
That's quite a lot of legislation, isn't it? So,
oh, yes.
So the stalking and harassment one would probably be next year then, wouldn't it? And the others after that.
Well, I've all got to go to law drafting and be completion by the end of 2025, so that they're lodged prior to when we fall into PERDA. So effectively, all of that legislation we want done by the time we stop in the States Assembly.
Okay. Right.
That's the plan, and hopefully that will come to fruition. We have had a dedicated resource in relation to law drafting, so from the board perspective. So hopefully that will all be, and obviously if for any reason anything of that falls into delay, or if there's a reason why it's not going to be done, then obviously we'll advise the panel as such.
Okay, no, and also I asked about any projects which have been really prioritised in terms of importance. So anything that's fallen back, for example.
I think our focus has been very much on the violence against women and girls. In relation to other pieces, quite obviously there are other pieces which I personally would like to be able to progress, and people are doing various bits of work on it, but I'm not in a position where we are now to be able to have that done in time for the next election.
Right, and what
or things like the firearms, fireworks, those sorts of priorities, because they are still priorities to me.
Yeah.
However, I've got to do this has got to be done before those will get done.
Okay. Right. So just about budget savings now. The previous budget proposed savings of £334,000 for Justice and Home Affairs and £172,000 for the States of Jersey Police. So please can you detail how this has progressed in 2025, where these savings have been identified?
I think I'll ask Kate if that's okay in relation to JHA, and then Robin in relation to SOJP.
So it was particularised for JHA into two separate parts. There was a part for reduction in growth from 2024 government plan items, which has incrementally affected a little bit of investment in the ambulance service and a little bit in fire and rescue, but priorities have been, it's been reprioritised to accommodate that reduction, so that is delivered. And then the remainder is 244,000, which is role reduction. So we have reduced one role in Customs and Immigration. We've taken one senior manager post out following Rhiannon's promotion. So there is a delivered saving there. There is a remaining 86,000 in Justice and Home Affairs that isn't allocated at the moment. We will save it, but we haven't yet identified exactly how.
Okay.
And then obviously Robin will want to give his.
And those so far have been changes to job positions, people's positions. Okay.
Yeah, so there's a number of senior managers who have a number of different portfolios that they're deployed to. So the team have changed the way that those current post holders are deployed in order to accommodate the reduction in one post.
Okay.
Thank you. The SOJP budget, as previously been explained to the panel and indeed to others, of just over 13 million, around about 90, maybe 92% of that is people. So to find savings, necessary savings, the wriggle room in anything other that is not pay, there is no savings to be made in non-pay, particularly against some of the inflationary costs that the island has had over the last few years. So that's a very long answer to say it's people, it's headcount. So we are achieving it, and we have already achieved it by not recruiting to certain posts and then finding efficiencies within that.
Would those posts be frontline? Would they be counted as frontline?
They are police staff posts.
Right, okay. All right, so Minister, you previously suggested that among the options available, savings could be made through a reduction in, well, I've already asked that question. I was going to ask about reduction in senior roles, but this is exactly what you've just been saying. So now on to some particular projects. The panel notes that several ongoing capital projects have received funding from previous government plans. So could you please provide an update on the following projects, which I think have been going on for some time, all of them. So the first one is Dewberry House.
Yes. The result of the planning appeal heard in February has been communicated to the project team. The appeal was actually dismissed, and the project can therefore now proceed. The design team will now work on any necessary amendments and revert to an updated target programme with scheduling as soon as they possibly can. Obviously, because of the delays in that process, that may mean that there may be a shortfall in funding, in which case we'll obviously have to look to see how that will be funded. Right. But obviously we don't know at this current stage what that will mean.
Okay, and I remember in 2022 there were plans just about ready for Dewberry House. It's been a long time.
Yeah, what happened was that planning permission was passed, and then there was an appeal made by a third party. So of course with the planning process, even if planning give permission, if people have gone to the planning process, to the public meetings in relation to planning, if somebody wants to appeal about that, if they're in a particular close location to it, then they can make a third party appeal. And of course that then has to go to a planning appeal. And so nothing can be done until that planning appeal is resolved, and that wasn't until February of this year. I mean, planning processes, as you know, can take a significant period of time, unfortunately, and so that's what we've had to wait for.
Okay, and the next one was the new firearms range.
Yes, that progress is continuing and is in line with its targets. It was obviously approved, and the structural works, I gather, are 80% completed, and it hopefully should be completed by the end of this year.
Okay. Then I've got prison improvement works.
I haven't got that on the list, right?
Yeah, you probably got more up to speed on it than me.
So the sort of final phase of this tranche is underway, which is the demolition of the old gatehouse and the sort of making good of that area. It involves moving the fence line and then temporarily at least creating some more parking at the front of the site. The next phases were delayed in the long-term capital plan in the budget. So we're having a relook at what the next priorities are. Obviously, we'll take into account the inspection outcomes. Conscious you've got questions about that later. Yeah. So we're just having another look at the strategic plan, essentially, for what the next phase of investment will be and how we can do that, conscious of the outcomes of the inspection.
But the first bit you mentioned about the old gatehouse and some more parking, that's definitely happening.
Yeah, it's well underway, yeah.
Okay, and then the last one I've got mentioned here is the Army and Sea Cadets headquarters.
Yeah, we continue to review locations, designs against Army and Sea Cadets requirements that will enable a new shared headquarters that will complete a States Assembly commitment, which was in 2019. This is a key prerequisite to the development of the Rouge Boyle site, obviously, as they currently reside at this location. In terms of options, JHA are also engaging with education colleagues to look at the viability of sharing some facilities with a secondary school. But obviously that is all still sort of ongoing progress. Is there anything further in the last week? No.
Wasn't that going to be down at La Folie at one point?
That was a very, very long time ago at La Folie. And unfortunately, I think the site that was discussed at La Folie was taken off the table because it was wanted for something else. And so I think, and that was, that must be in excess of 8 odd years ago, from my recollections. The La Folie
Well, it
was
came up again since then,
2
didn't
years,
it? While the
2
panel's
years
been-
ago.
Yeah,
Okay,
so there's,
okay.
Yeah.
so there's
Yeah.
been 2 different potential
La Folie
locations
was-
down at the harbour. We were looking more recently at La Folie. There'd previously been one at La Gallows, which is slightly further down, which had been worked up and wasn't capable of achieving planning permission. The La Folie set, by which we actually mean the industrial sheds at the back of La Folie, not the actual
Yeah.
inn, was looked at and from a feasibility point of view for us. But it's Ports of Jersey land, and they are working on alternative uses for that site. So whilst we have designs for a CCAD HQ there, we're not currently pursuing that option.
Okay, because they have other plans for it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, I have got a question still about this, which is, do you have specific measures in place to monitor how these projects are progressing? I mean, I expect you to do that.
Yeah, so they're overseen through the Corporate Portfolio Management Office in the Government of Jersey. We do monthly reporting on them. The accountable officer will have a structure in place of a senior responsible officer. So, the first 2 you've asked about are actually under Robin, and then the Sea Cadets and prisoner under me, of course. So I have a senior responsible officer for each of the projects, and it's their responsibility to make sure they're on track and that they're reporting effectively and that they're delivering. There is, of course, always constraints and interdependencies that we face. For example, as the Minister's given the example of the planning appeal in relation to Dewberry House, where they're not always within our control, but it's incumbent on the accountable officer and the senior responsible officer of the project to make sure that they are delivering within quality, cost and time, ideally.
Okay, thanks. So I just have a question now, a slightly different one. In light of several security incidents recently, covering various responsibilities of your department, what lessons have been learnt in terms of risk management procedures and responses? We had something up at the airport not long ago, for example. So, yes, have there been learnings following that?
In relation to obviously any incident, regardless of what it is, as a result of any of those incidents, there will be what we would call a hot debrief, and then thereafter a follow-up debrief in relation to learnings from those incidents. And as a result of that, there will be obviously potentially changes to the plans, maybe. Maybe Robin could probably give a bit more of an insight, I would think, in relation to the airport incident, but I think that's sort of in a nutshell.
Thank you, Minister. The airport incident, again, was a hoax email, which was explained to islanders. Of course, primacy for the evacuation of the airport is entirely the Ports of Jersey. It's the Ports of Jersey's responsibility to determine whether or not they will evacuate based on the information. So it's for them to do a threat and risk assessment based on the information provided to them. And it was their decision to, which I support, it was their decision to evacuate. My understanding is that evacuation was done very well. But like every incident, there is always learning. And the Minister is right. There has already been a hot debrief, not just with the police service, but with senior people of the Ports of Jersey and the airport and other agencies. And then there is a longer debrief that may have already happened by now. I'm not sure. I'd have to check my dates, which the police are participating in, so that we can properly support Ports of Jersey, and in particular the airport, in their decision-making and risk assessments into the future. So the important thing is that there is always learning. That's not necessary to say that things went wrong. In fact, I think a lot of things went right.
Okay, thank you. And then also, there was an incident at a school around that time, so that would come under
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, that obviously, again, that would be, that's an educational thing, so that would come under education, and they would have made the decisions based on what they had in front of them. Obviously, as Robin said, Ports of Jersey are obviously responsible for the airport, but education would have been the education department, and they would have made their decisions on how they were going to react to those particular circumstances. And again, there would have been a debrief in relation to how that was dealt with and whether there was any learning and whether there's anything that needs to be done differently in the future.
Okay, so when these things happen, there isn't like an overall team that's trying to monitor things going on.
I can help with that. There isn't a team that's dedicated necessarily. We do have an emergency planning team,
Yeah.
a very experienced emergency planning team, and they are involved in how we will assess in the future. So the police service will, of course, go to UK colleagues to help with understanding the threat and risk. And on these occasions, it was emails, and those emails were sent to a number of schools, as was explained to Islanders. And then how do we assess those if we have those in the future? That's where the learning really comes from. But the Minister's absolutely right. It's down to the individual head teachers to determine whether or not they wish to evacuate. And of course, we will support them in that and in that decision making. I think what the recent incident done, and it's important to state that the two incidents are not related. You know, it's fairly common to receive emails in this way from anywhere in the world that is seeking to disrupt, etc. They are not connected. But again, we've met with our colleagues in education to talk about how we deal with those again into the future.
Okay, thanks. You mentioned the emergency planning team, but we also have a new resilience policy being worked on, don't we? And I just wondered about the progress of that.
So, as we've discussed before, the development of that into a new law wasn't prioritised for delivery before the election. That was just a sensible position of realism in terms of the amount of work that needs to be done and the rest of the work that was in the pipeline. But we are actively working on it. So officers in the emergency planning team and the Cabinet Office policy team are working on what a new resilience law would look like. Okay. We are, whilst we're doing that, continuing to strengthen the resilience arrangements for the island generally, really developing the Jersey Resilience Forum executive and delivery group, which is the widest construct that meets every 4 months, is now in a much better cycle of feeding into the Emergencies Council. And seeking to act in a more resilience thinking way. So that is showing real benefits and dividends. We've got, of course, extra resource in the emergency planning team at the moment, which means we've got an officer each with a portfolio for risk, plans and training, learning and exercising. And we're really seeing the benefits of that because it means that the work flows through a logical cycle, and where we do have learning from incidents, we're much better able to embed it and make it actual action that's demonstrable in the resilience community, and that everyone understands the direction of travel and what the lessons learned were and how we would act differently in the future. I'm much more confident in that function now than I was, which feeds into the new resilience approach and in due course into a new law.
Okay, so I was actually going to ask about the Jersey Resilience Forum as well, and how the responsibilities of Justice and Home Affairs in relation to the forum works in response to these incidents. But when you describe the debriefs and so on, all this work takes part in the Resilience Forum as well then? So
the Resilience Forum effectively sits as a planning and preparedness forum. The executive is a small group, it's currently chaired by the Chief Exec of the Government of Jersey in the Public Service, has each of the 3 emergency services chiefs, me, Director of Public Health, Director of Ports, and the Director of the Jersey Cybersecurity Centre on it. And then the delivery group is much, much wider. It's all the critical national infrastructure partners, utility partners, etc. So the emphasis is on planning and preparedness, but it then means when there's an incident, it's those people that constitute strategic coordination groups and, to start with, initial review groups at the start of the process, working up towards an SCG. And the level of planning preparedness that we're doing and the familiarity with individuals and organisations in their roles is really showing effect when we then have an incident and we have to pull together to deal with the incident. So it's a really good structure now. I'm more, as I say, much more confident in it. There's still improvement to make, but we are now working in a much more resilient and effective way.
Good.
Which is good.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I think that's you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, we have several questions relating to Lamoy Prison, and in particular the Independent Prison Monitoring Board annual report. The panel would like to know what your key takeaways from the report in your capacity as Minister for Justice and Home Affairs.
Yes, as you know, the report was published in February. That's the inspection, it is, you're right.
Next page.
Yeah, it doesn't actually say that. It does actually
No,
say,
sorry.
it says the
Yeah.
wrong header. But anyway, yes, obviously it's an independent panel, and retaining the members has, some quite challenging parts to it from the point of view of the roles, because it is actually quite challenging. And people do come and go, but we have got a very good board of members. The residential, their report sort of says the residential wings are okay. I think one of their biggest concerns was the fact that, let me just bear with me for a second, and my brain, in relation to some of the elements of the prisoners and the sort of group of individuals that were inside of the prison. As an example, they identified that we needed to do probably a little bit more awareness in relation to staff for prisoners with neurodivergent needs. And obviously that's recognised by us, and that will be work ongoing that we need to progress. I think the other element that is of concern is the fact that we have, because of the capacity of the prison and some of the elements of it, sometimes we have people that end up on certain wings, and they are potentially there for longer than the prison board would like, as would we. And so we do need to do more work in relation to being able to encourage people maybe to go back onto a wing, because we do have step-up facilities to come off the sort of isolation wing, but we do need to do some more work to get people who've ended up on an isolation wing to actually get them off that isolation wing, but then to move them on again. And sometimes that can be quite challenging, because obviously facilities aren't always great, and the other side of it, of course, is the work opportunities as well. So there's lots of work that needs to be done in relation to that. But I think, from my perspective, that is one of the things that I really would like to see improved in the next 12 months, is that ability for us to be able to not have people in isolation for quite so long.
I have some questions about that, actually, so I might change those as a result of your answer. So urgent actions, you would say, would be the changing of the isolation wing?
Yeah, I think it is about, and it involves a lot of care and thought, because I think sometimes people will end up on an isolation wing, but sometimes they actually have apprehension to go back back onto a normal wing.
Yes.
So that can obviously inflate that. So we need to work more closely with that. But also, I think as well, in relation to the opportunities for work and ensuring that they have as much time outside of their cell as others, and what other opportunities there are, because obviously all of those dynamics make a difference. And I think that's where I would like to see a lot more work done that we can do. And the prison are obviously working towards that as well.
Is there a timescale for those changes, Minister?
Well, some of it is quite challenging from the point of view of we do need to have better facilities, certainly in relation to the educational side of it. And obviously that's going to need more money will need to come, investment for the prison. because, as I said, we're going to need to obviously do the educational side of it. And, you know, we've knocked down buildings with a reason for knocking them down was to actually make better facilities. So that will be something that obviously I'll need to discuss with colleagues this year and next. And obviously a new government will obviously need to look at this as well, because without a doubt in my mind, we will need some investment in the prison.
Surely. Would be grand if you could keep the panel informed about those updates.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to move on to the subject of the body scanner, if I may. Can you provide us with an update on funding solutions for a body scanner for the Lamoille prison?
So this was picked up in the inspection report, of course, as I think we just had it when we last met you. We are looking at feasibility around a body scanner. It is around £100,000. It's not currently in our plan. It could be covered in a future minor capital plan. So Justice and Home Affairs and SOJP get a sort of rolling vote of money from Treasury to cover our quite significant minor capital needs each year. And we're just looking at the right product and whether it's feasible for delivery within the money in future years. In the meantime, of course, the prison are managing scanning and searching requirements in a humane and suitable way. It would just add a tool to their regime.
I was just going to ask
If they
about
had
the mitigation measures that you put in place in the intervening time between now and the introduction of the regime.
It's sensible and appropriate searching on reception and on entry to the prison instead.
Okay, thank you. Minister, in response to fears that the prison was impacted by the UK's overcrowding crisis, with UK prisoners making up over 40%, as is reported, of those residents in Lamoille, can you confirm whether transfers have been recommenced to UK prisons?
Yes, it has been recommenced. However, it's not as much as we would like, because we are still limited to only sort of one or two at a time. So we still do have those challenges. So until we're able to move it forward, and of course, we've got quite a lot of prisoners waiting to go, and that can be quite a challenge as well, because obviously they're requesting to go, and we would like to be able to facilitate that, but we can only facilitate it as quick as we can as we can get places, because of course it isn't only ourselves, but it is also Guernsey and the Isle of Man as well. So we're trying to work as a team with the other Crown dependencies. I don't know if there's anything you want to
That's a key thing, really. It was the Crown dependencies working together that cracked being able to negotiate and navigate a pathway with the English and Welsh Prison Service, but it does mean that we have to sort of have only one in every three transfers, but we will get there slowly, and it is beginning to have an effect.
How confident, therefore, do you think the agreement with the UK authorities will remain in place and not be subject to this sort of issue in the future?
Quite frankly, I think it would be great if it can actually sort of take pace. But I think the thing is that, you know, at any stage where it's felt that the UK aren't in a position to be able to assist or take them, then we could end up back in the same position. And of course, you know, we're not in a holding position where we can make those choices. All we can do is ensure that those, you know, that we continue to push at that door in order that those transfers can happen with the other Crown dependencies. But I think, you know, we saw that they were potentially in the UK having to have early releases and all of those other things. And so I think the thing is that we will continue to push at the door and get as many through as we can. But of course, you know, we're also in a position that we could end up, if we say, you know, tomorrow we had 5 go, we could end up in a process where in 2 weeks, 3 weeks' time, we've got another 5 in. So I think the thing is it's always going to be a challenge for us now that we've ended up in a position where we haven't been able to sort of send people fairly swiftly. I think that, you know, there's a catch-up game, isn't there? So I couldn't say with confidence that we're going to be in a good position for long term, but we can only just keep going and keep trying to get those individuals who wish to be. But not only that, it's not only transfers to the UK, we actually also facilitate transfers to other places as well, and some of those actually have happened as well. So I think that's an important thing if somebody actually wants to go back and serve their sentence, you know, as long as those policies and processes are in place.
Thank you for your honesty, Minister. The next question was going to be relating to the segregation units, but I think we've already dealt with that, so I'll move on. The report recognised the need for increased support to accommodate neurodivergent prisoners. We've already mentioned this. Can you provide details of actions or potential new policies put in place, if any, to address these concerns?
Yeah, so we're treating that as part of the wider, it's multifaceted really, the wider healthcare approach, which, as you know, has been materially improved at the prison in partnership with Health and Care Jersey, and also part of the approach to, it's called purposeful activity in the inspection report, in that making sure that there's good awareness of neurodivergent needs in the offer, which, as we know from the inspection report, needs material improvement. And we have action plans in place for that. And the Archer and the team, I'd need to check the detail with them, but Archer and the team are also planning on working closely with one of the members of the IPMB, who's got special interest in this, and others, of course, to ensure that where they've got personal officers for each prisoner, those personal officers are properly trained in recognising and supporting neurodivergence. So there's quite a number of different actions underway. Some of them are only really in their infancy and need quite a lot more development. But of course, it's been picked up by both the IPMB and the Prisons Inspectorate, and there's a good programme of work for us to undertake there.
So we've identified one agency. Are there any other agencies that you've considered to bring alongside with regard to these neuro-inclusive strategies and how they could be implemented in your department?
I would need to check, actually. I'm not sure we've got the... Arta has talked us through the action plan for the inspection, but I'm not sure what partners we're considering. I mean, there are obvious ones in the island, of course, but I'm not sure what partners we're potentially considering working with. But we can check and find out.
We'll get an update on that, I'm sure.
And we're due to brief you in a private briefing on the action plan from the inspection in a few weeks' time as well. So that's good. We'll make sure, Arta will be here, we'll make sure that we've got the information for then.
Thank you very much. The report also cites, and I quote, observed instances where it is a challenge for the prison to effectively manage complex prisoners in custody, where again relating to that issue. We have escalated our observations and concerns in this regard to the JHA Minister and the JHA Chief Officer. Minister, what action have you taken or are planning to take in response to those concerns?
Yeah.
It's a specific case we talked about there, don't you want me to?
Yes.
Obviously, without talking about specific cases, we know what the IPMB are referring to. The Minister and I are obviously very concerned about any case where it seems like a really difficult issue to ensure that we're providing the right care and support and environment for any particular prisoner. There was a specific case which we just discussed yesterday, as I've alluded to, where the Minister's asked for a bit of a case review in a number of weeks' time, which the IPMB will be involved in, because we've all got the same concern. And so the prison team and the healthcare support team and the mental health team are reviewing options, for example, keeping it anonymous, but for that prisoner, and then the Minister will be briefed on that in due course. So it is, there is occasions where the Minister does take a case-by-case interest in particular situations, where generally the IPMB has flagged it to me and the Minister, and we share the concern, as does, of course, the Acting Prison Governor. So we are actively involved in a number of the most concerning cases.
Thank you very much.
That covers it, I think.
Yeah.
We'll meet with them in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, we'll have our briefing. It was noted that the body-worn cameras were due to be introduced in the second quarter of this year, 2025. Has this technology been introduced already? And if not, is it due to begin within the indicated time frame?
I would need to check exactly where we are on the deployment of them. I think we've got them, but I'm not sure we've deployed them yet. Okay. But let us check.
Yeah, thank you very much. And another question on the prison. Minister, can you provide any update on the recruitment of a permanent prison governor at this time?
I can. We obviously, the deadline is next Monday, the 5th, and we're being supported by Gatenby Sanderson. And there have been a good response so far in relation to the search phase. So we're confident of being able to make a strong appointment. The interview process will include a familiarisation day, including a tour of the prison, stakeholder panel, and they'll be meeting both myself and the chief officer. And those will take place on the 5th and 6th of June, potentially. And then hopefully we'll be able to appoint a candidate thereafter.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Finally, on the prison, further to your letter of the 13th of March, could you provide the panel with more information on the proposed pathways to reduce reoffending and what you see as the most important priorities in this improvements in this area?
I'll kick off with this and I'll ask Kate to just follow up. I think some of the priorities have to be, in relation to their pathways, has to be their ability to rehabilitate within the prison, as in getting the necessary education and qualifications, so that when they actually are ready to leave the prison, that they actually have those extra qualifications. But also as well, we need to sort of ensure that sort of accommodation is actually looked at to ensure that that's all the necessary things are done. I think also there needs to be sort of probably some closer links to other services for when they leave from the prison, to make sure that those for those prisoners that are under certain medical conditions which they've been looked after within the prison, particularly if they've been in there for a considerable period of time. I think we need to ensure that those pathways are fully aligned, so that when they come out, they don't fall through the gaps. And those off the top of my head, I think.
Yeah, that's the key thing.
I think the big thing for me is I think the big thing has to be education, because I think we all talk about lifelong learning, and that should apply to people that are actually in the prison as well, and particularly even more so for those that are in there for a long term, because they need to have a way of coming out of prison and being able to go back into society and being able to provide for themselves and families, etc.
Indeed. Thank you.
And you mentioned before about the post-custodial supervision as well coming in the new legislation, so that's going to make a difference, isn't it?
Yeah, due course,
When
yeah.
they come out of prison. Okay.
Thank you, Tracy.
I think that's Bea now then.
Hi, Minister. So going back to your letter from the 13th of March, which indicated that no accessibility audits had been undertaken in respect of the CESA system, are you presently satisfied that the platform is sufficiently user-friendly? And if so, have you consulted with any stakeholders to gauge feedback over this situation?
I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, my expert on my right-hand side.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Porry. So whilst we haven't undertaken any specific accessibility audits on CESA, what we have done over the last 2 years is we've worked with local market research companies. They go out to the population of Jersey, get them to test. We then take the feedback away from that. So without any specific, what we continuously do with CESA is look at ways we can enhance CESA, the ways we can make it better for the users of Jersey. We need to be mindful that CESA is one system. It deals with large businesses, small businesses, individuals. We need to ensure any tweaks we make don't then have unintended consequences for any of the other users. But it is an iterative system, and our focus and our strategy is very much on development to ease the burden of trade.
Okay, so it's ongoing. Thank you. Okay, so maybe for the Minister this time, you have stated that work towards a robust single trade window was ongoing. Can you provide the panel with any updates on this particular respect?
Yeah, I think, again, if you don't mind, I'll ask Rhiannon.
So single trade window, obviously, it's a global concept. And again, it's to ease the burden for trade globally for everybody. Working towards a single trade window now is a key component of our free trade agreements. So it's something we have to do as a jurisdiction. CESA is our single trade window as a jurisdiction. That is the one-stop shop for traders, for importers and exporters. So hence how I've already spoken about the development, we are continuously doing with CSER, working with our software developers. We also work very closely with our local stakeholders, specifically Revenue Jersey and the Environment Department, around the movement of goods. We have no time frame for single trade window. Effectively, CSER is our single trade window. It's up and running as a single trade window now. We just need to focus on the development of it. The UK have currently paused their funding for their single trade window, but we're continuing with development of CSER.
Helen just wants to.
Can I just dig a bit more around the CSER system? So, is there any sort of strategic project to replace it with something more user friendly? Is there any money allocated to it, or is it just we see something wrong and we put it right?
So it's iterative, so when we see something wrong, we do put it right. As for a strategy, we went out in 2022 to do market research on whether we could replace these with any other systems. We're satisfied that we can't at the moment, so we are continuing with CSER.
So CSER is maintained by a local company?
Yep, so software developers are a local company. We work very closely with them. Again, as I've said, it's iterative in nature, continuous development.
And what is the relationship between modernisation and digital and customs and immigration when it comes to replacements and development and the like?
So obviously a freight handling system it's a big system to have. There's a lot of engagement needed both locally within government with M&D or digital services and also a software development company. So we meet regularly. We're working towards what strategy we can put in place for CSER going forward, both with digital services, with JSIS and with the software developers around the table.
Okay, and what timescale is attached to that?
So at the moment, the focus for us on strategy of CSER is development, making the CSER we have as user-friendly as possible. So that's our focus on strategy for the next year.
It's pretty unuser-friendly if you're an individual importer.
Yeah, so as I've said, I think what we need to be mindful of is because it's also used for big businesses and small businesses and individuals, we need to make sure that that one-stop shop is suitable for everybody who uses it. Again, as I've said to Deputy Porre, we've used the market research companies. We will continue to do that. We will continue to go out to the public of Jersey. We will ask them for their feedback. We'll listen to their feedback. We'll work on developing it as best we can. Obviously mindful of budget constraints.
Yeah. In terms of kind of disability discrimination stuff, you haven't had an accessibility audit on it. If you're visually impaired, if you have a hearing impairment, it's practically impossible to access CSER. You'd have to get somebody else to do that. How kind of high up the importance level is accessibility to CSER for you?
So it's very important, and the market research company we've used locally did go out to everybody in Jersey as best they can to try and get the feedback and the testers in. It's something I'm keen to continue to do, not just ad hoc, but maybe annually or biannually, in which case we'll certainly look at accessibility and make sure the market research companies we're using locally will consider specific disability access or accessibility audits in the future.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the update. Thank you. Okay, so with regards to the electronic travel authorization system, can you please tell us when it's likely to be introduced in Jersey? And if so, what measures have been taken to ensure a smooth transition period?
Obviously, the electronic travel authorisation forms part of the future border and immigration system, a programme which is delivering on the UK government strategy for legal migration and border control. At the moment, we are looking at potentially the end of this year. I think that's correct. So it'll be the latter part of 2025 when we will be looking for that to be coming in.
Introduction. Thank you for that. Okay. So, Minister, has the government taken any further action to protect the rights of those arriving in Jersey on temporary work permits? And if so, are there plans to do so?
Sorry, so can I on what part are you asking me? Sorry,
Okay, so we're talking about immigration, border control, so I'm just touching on the permit workers. My question to you is if any further action has been taken to protect the rights of those arriving in the island on temporary work permits, and if not, why not? I suppose if I was to kind of give you a bit more of indication, that's based to focus on the work permit policy review that has taken place and the recommendations put towards it.
Yeah, I think I'll ask my colleague on the right shortly as well. But I think we've updated all of our policies and procedures. I think as a result of the work permit review, and we continue to look at those and continue to work with and update them. I don't know whether you've got anything that you want to sort of add to that, really.
No, I think you're absolutely right. So, all the recommendations that we agreed to undertake as part of the scrutiny panel review have been completed. Updated guidance has been published fairly recently. The work permit policy has been reviewed. So we are obviously aware that there's a much larger number of work permit holders now than there has been historically because of Brexit. So we are always looking to improve not only our processes but making sure that any information that we receive or any concerns that we received are acted upon promptly and appropriately in conjunction with the government departments, to ensure the ongoing welfare of any work permit holder in Jersey.
Thank you. So is it fair for me to say that since the response of the recommendations on the review of the work permit, after the recommendation, there's been no other thoughts of how to improve? I mean, I'm just trying to gauge.
I think there's been some sort of significant improvements from the point of view that people are now able to sort of have more than one position, I think. I think also there's been quite a lot of work done in relation to where people are on a permit which allows them to bring partners and dependents, that the thresholds of their salaries is looked at closely to ensure that when people are bringing dependents to the island, that they are earning sufficient money to be able to afford to live on the island, because as we all know, there'll be rent and social security and tax. So what we need to ensure is that if people bring dependents, that they are able to have a good life in Jersey and be able to have, the necessities, as opposed to actually, as we've seen sort of probably in recent times, where people might end up having to use food banks, and it would be wrong of us to sort of have work permit holders and saying, yes, come to Jersey, when in actual fact, realistically, what we're looking at, they're being paid and what they have to, their outlays are, that actually realistically they can't live here. So I think we've put that in place, and I think you might be able to give a better idea of the component as to how you actually assess that. Mm.
Yeah, so in terms of salary thresholds and income, we look at the income support levels accordingly. So we ensure that the salary thresholds are such that a worker and their independents have sufficient money left over after their food accommodation to meet their demands. The work permit policy is designed to be flexible. The economy in Jersey is evolving. The needs of employers in Jersey is evolving all the time. So it's not as if the policy is written in stone and will never change. It is constantly changing and evolving. Mm-hmm. In response, to, as I said, to the economy, but also to any other issues that may arise. And we work very hard to ensure that is the case.
Mm-hmm. I thank you so much. I was more focused on what is being done, if anything further, in terms of protecting the workers rather than guidelines. But maybe I can just follow up with another question. So, for instance, looking further into the actions to protect migrant workers, such as, for instance, how they access the system and how they use the system in Jersey, what is but this one is particular to yourself, Minister. What is your opinion about the process where work permit holders have been to an employment tribunal with their employers? What have you gauged the situation? I'm trying to kind of, again, sorry to repeat myself, to look at how is the island responding to the protection of migrant workers. So in terms of tribunal, the employment tribunal settings, have you been aware of any issues in that case, or have you got any opinion regarding that?
I'm not actually aware of sort of any, or no tribunals have actually been brought to my attention. Obviously, from I think the perspective of people coming into Jersey on visas, I think it is essential that the employer takes responsibility for the welfare and potentially, obviously, depending on the industry, providers of the accommodation, etc. I think if there's any sort of issues highlighted and it goes to a tribunal, then I think the results of those tribunals, there may be value to those being fed back into either, well, probably social security as well as potentially to ourselves. Because, of course, from our perspective, it's very important that you've got all of the data on the systems, but it's also very important that the visas sort of issued on the basis that the employer wants an employee. And so therefore it is both, it is all agencies plus the actual employers who are responsible for the welfare of the employees. It's not, you know, it is across the piece, in my view, that it's, we issue the work permits on the request of an employer. So therefore we need to ensure that they are abiding by those rules as well. But, and obviously the rules do say that, but also as well that the employers are actually abiding by those rules. Because if you've got an employer who is actually bringing people into the island and they are treating them unfairly, then that needs to be sort of highlighted in order that as a department, immigration could actually withhold somebody being able to get a visa in the future for somebody if they don't treat their staff right. So I think it's a generic thing that has to happen with everybody. So I think the responsibility lies with all of them, you know, the Social Security, the Environment Minister, because obviously, you know, hospitality, all of those ministerial positions, as well as obviously the responsibility for Justice and Home Affairs, because they are the ones that actually issue the visa. But I think all of those other ministers alongside the employers have to ensure that the welfare of people coming into the island as a whole.
Thank you, Minister. I think that's a very honest answer. I was more pointing at the mechanisms of the employment tribunal, and my understanding with your answer is that possibly you have not been that involved with it, which is a fair answer. So thank you for that. Okay, so my next question is regarding the report of the work permit holder, welfare review panel again, where there was a recommendation rejected to set out the enforcement mechanism and to put in place to ensure that work permit holders are suitably accommodated. Given the potential health safety risks associated with substandard accommodation, would you consider engaging with the Minister of Environment to ensure that these risks are properly mitigated?
I think the answer to that is yes. But what I would highlight is that in actual fact, I think some of the legislation that will be coming forward in relation to accommodation overall will be inclusive of that accommodation as well, is my understanding.
Have you got time framing for that?
I haven't got a time frame for it, no. But also, and I think what is worth mentioning is that I will be meeting other agencies in relation to potential fire safety regulations that will be coming forward. And I've requested that in relation to all of those regulations that we liaise with all those that have accommodation. And so that would be landlords, that would be obviously agricultural industries, that would be hospitality, that would be potentially people who let out in relation to Airbnbs, because I think the thing is that across the piece we will be introducing legislation which I think we need to make sure that everybody is aware of some of the potential obligations.
Thank you. What expectations would you have for investigations, including potential criminal investigation, to be undertaken when accommodation standards and other health and safety issues led to negative welfare outcomes for income migrant workers, or in tragic consequences, fatal accidents?
I think what needs to happen is that I think if we put in place the necessary checks and balances into relation to what I've just said, in so that there's an assessment of the accommodation in relation to suitability alongside the health and safety and fire regulations and all of those regulations. If those things are all put in place, then we shouldn't end up in one of those situations. If you do end up in one of those situations, then obviously it would be a matter for whichever department it sits under. So effectively, if there was an incident, it would obviously have to be investigated by whichever department that fell under, really. So it wouldn't necessarily be, for example, the police, because it's not going to necessarily be that. It might be a health and safety matter. It might be under environmental matter. It might be under fire service. So I think I can't answer on a specific question. I think the answer is that all of those things need to be put into place to ensure that this doesn't happen. And if it does, then obviously it would have to be investigated as to what had happened, and then subsequent to that investigation, then obviously that would obviously be looked at again.
Are you optimistic that if all these things will come together at some point?
I think we always have to try and be optimistic that we will end up in a situation as positive as it ever can be. Unfortunately, we will, I think, reality tells me that you can endeavour to do the best that you can, but you can't always prevent everything. So from my perspective, I would want to do the best that you can, but you can't always prevent everything.
Okay, thank you. And I just have to say, we have
Melissa.
just under half an hour left, so we're going to have to keep the questions and answers a little bit shorter to try and get through a few more.
Okay, I'll be very quick with mine. I've just got some questions about the JMAPA report for 2024. Just some of the key points, I think, for us is that the number of registered sex offenders in Jersey has risen from 246 to 277. Only 6 offenders deregistered compared to 10 the year before. And I think the question is just about whether you're happy with the processes that are currently in place for registering and particularly deregistering sex offenders, and whether you've got any potential concerns about privacy issues and the like.
I think the system has changed to where now it's in a closed court as opposed to an open court, and I think that's probably potentially why people weren't deregistering. It has been a discussion that we've had in relation to this matter, and I think we're going to look at potentially doing some further work to see whether or not we could actually do something similar to the UK, but we need to actually have a look to see whether that is feasible or not and what exactly that means.
So would you consider then the automatic deregistration of sex offenders?
From my perspective, I think that would be the right thing to do. That's my view. But obviously I need to see whether or not how that will all work. But I think the whole system, that actually is what should happen.
Okay, is that something that you're likely to be able to bring before the end of your term?
Probably
not.
Probably not. But it can certainly. It's something that I've raised, and I would like to see that, because I think that's the right thing to do.
Okay,
You could potentially be prepared ready for early introduction in the next term.
Okay, thank you. The other thing that the report references is as a result of sexual offences in other jurisdictions, as a factor in the changes. So people have been coming from the United Kingdom to live in Jersey. So we were just wondering if you can confirm actually how many sex offenders moved to Jersey in 2024.
I don't know. We'd have to
don't
check.
know
We'd
that.
have to check, okay.
Yeah.
And have you got any concerns that kind of those individuals, so that not the Jersey offenders, are kind of contributing to the workload, if you like, of the offender management unit?
Sorry, say that again.
We've got a number of sex offenders who've been convicted in other jurisdictions that
yes.
have moved to Jersey
Yes.
and therefore require supervision for the offender management unit. So is there a concern that the offender management unit is becoming kind of blocked up supervising non-Jersey sex offenders?
That's not something that's been brought to my attention. However, obviously that's something that we probably do need to look at, whether that's, I don't know about them, we'd obviously have to look at the numbers and to see whether that's got a significant impact on that or not.
How does it work permission-wise then if a sex offender wants to move to Jersey? Does somebody have to give them permission in Jersey to move?
That I'm not aware of.
Or can anybody just...
Well,
we're not
I
sure.
assume, you see, I don't suppose,
We need to check.
yeah, I don't know that actually.
Can you just tell us what policies are already in place then for the supervision of sex offenders, the post-custodial supervision, so those who've been released from custody?
That I don't know.
No, I'm afraid I don't either. We'd have to. I think we're lacking the detail, the operational detail behind the report. So
All right then.
perhaps we can write to you afterwards.
Yeah, again, the question again, maybe put it into writing, but, you know, we want to know whether there's sufficient communication between the prison and the police in the instances of early or temporary release of sex offenders, and the last one as well.
Yeah.
You might be able to answer it now. Have any concerns been highlighted through the victim notification scheme?
I don't recall any. I don't know if Robin does, but let us look at it and we'll write
We'll
to
put that into writing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. That's back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Yeah, we really would appreciate getting those answers in writing because it seems an important matter.
Yeah, of course.
So I have some questions now about ambulance service. So with plans for new ambulance facilities on hold until 2028, are you satisfied that interim improvement measures in the current facilities are sufficient for operational needs and have identified all potential risks with the old building?
I think the building, the needs of the building is sufficient at the moment because there's been some work done. Sorry, I don't know if that's my understanding. I don't know whether Gordon's got anything further than that.
So we've had significant investment works which are being carried out and completed currently on the site, and this is allowing us to bring an older building back up to the standards that we need for modern day working with an ambulance service. So current works are improving both office-based areas for the growth staff that we've seen, and also some of the operational space for the operational staff to improve welfare facilities and various other pieces. So as a provision for the next few years, it's certainly going to be something that will be suitable.
So at the moment, it's been areas for staff to relax in or things like that.
Agreed. Yeah, the plans involve updated to all of the staff welfare and break areas, as well as the provision of specific welfare areas to support post-incident debrief sessions and that opportunity for staff to get away from the operational provision as a recovery piece post-incidents.
That's good. And Minister, can you provide the panel with any new updates regarding the move of ambulance services from Justice and Home Affairs to the Health Department?
Yes, it's moving forward and we believe that it will be beginning of June.
1st of July.
1st of July, sorry, 1st of July.
Okay, and how will you ensure that there will be no disruption to services during this transition?
I think bearing in mind that the only sort of difference will be is that the management of the head of the ambulance service will be coming under the head of health as opposed to coming under Kate. So the change in the actual sort of management of the ambulance service, if you like, will still fall under the same person. It's just that person will have a different person to be accountable to.
And that higher management process, that's all going to be a smooth transition, all worked on and everything?
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be. So it's a short consultation with the Chief Ambulance Officer on changing his line management. But we've also got a staff engagement exercise just launched today, actually, for ambulance staff and also Health and Care Jersey staff to raise any questions or concerns, and then have a forum with me and the Chief Officer for Health and Care Jersey later on in May for us to discuss and explain our answers to those concerns. There's a project board on which Tom and I both sit and sort of jointly chair, essentially, and a project group which is wider and includes for each department the finance, HR, digital services, governance functions. Our aim is to make sure that we're doing it in a really good level of detail, which we would all reflect wasn't done in 2018-19. But as the Minister says, really the only change on the 1st of July is the Chief Ambulance Officer faces to the Chief Officer for Health and Care Jersey instead of to me. But we're very keen that staff properly understand the change. It should be a beneficial change, bring them closer to clinical governance structures and health and care colleagues.
Okay.
So we're,
And the proposal is that obviously the funding for the ambulance will be fenced for that purpose.
Yeah.
Which is obviously important because you don't want to switch them from one department to the other and then suddenly find them swallowed up. So I think both Kate and I will just monitor that.
that's the commitment from the Chief Officer.
Yeah.
And so that sounds straightforward, and perhaps that's one reason why a business case was not seen as necessary. We asked to see the business case and then found out that no business case had been produced for the change. So can you give any evidence to us about what justified this decision for no business case?
Can I be frank?
Yeah.
They should never have been moved from health to JHA.
Yeah.
And a number of us in the first term of office actually disagreed with the principle of moving what is a health part to actually moving them under to Justice and Home Affairs, and to be blunt, because they've got a blue light on the top of their vehicle. And so from the aspect of when we first started having discussions with the Health Minister, they were pushing an open door from my point of view. And I think from the ambulance point of view as well, because I think even though they've got very close working relationships with all the emergency services, which is important, they are a health facility. They will also come under the Care Commission. And so the thing is that they need to have those facilities and be able to actually tap into all of that that's going to come under the Care Commission, as opposed to being outside, an outliner from out of that. So that's probably why I didn't even, it didn't even occur from my perspective that you had to have a business case, because I just thought it was the wrong move in the first place.
Yeah.
There's no financial impact, which would be one of the reasons if we needed investment why we would write a business case, and the other would be if it's a significant organisational change for staff. And of course it isn't, because it's a single line management change for the Chief Ambulance Officer. So there is no requirement in government process terms for a business case. We're very happy to explain the rationale, but we haven't done it through that document.
And when that was moved before was 2018?
The decision was 2018 and took effect on the 1st of January 2019.
Okay, thank you. I think it's the last, no, it's not the last one. Do you expect to see any improvements in efficiency of services as a result of this change, or not really?
I don't really think that should make a difference, really, because it's just going to be under a different line manager. So I don't necessarily think that will be the case. But
Gordon and I can probably both amplify a little bit. So from our point of view, what we want to do is make sure that where there is an overlap with Justice and Home Affairs services, that the rest of the emergency services and others, that remains efficient. And the ambulance service is an important part in the resilience arrangements I was describing earlier, for example, and that will continue to be the case. The ambulance service and the fire and rescue service work very closely together on co-responding, as we've discussed before. That will continue to be the case. But there should be some gains and some improvements by ambulance being within that wider health and care Jersey family in terms of clinical governance, support for processes, procedures, etc. That's perhaps where the discussions you've had come in.
Absolutely, I support the position you put forward, Kate, and the fundamental change that will work in favour of the ambulance service will be that reconnection with the clinical governance framework within HCJ, which will ultimately lead to us forming a part of the conversation around how do we provide better healthcare to the islanders. That's one of the fundamental improvements, because we will be part of the right conversations and the meetings that will form part of the HEJ. It's important to note that we go back into HEJ as a service which can contribute to the overarching partnership board, and how that will work going forward. We'll see improvements. So I think it's improvement rather than efficiency that we will see.
Can I just ask a really quick question? What's happening to the control room?
I was
Ambulance
about to ask
control
the
room.
same question.
So from the 1st of July, it will remain under Justice and Home Affairs, so it's under the JHA Directorate as opposed to the Ambulance Service. And we will deliver under a Memorandum of Understanding for the Ambulance Service while we consider the longer term options for the ESCC. It will probably have to change more significantly in the future, but that will be the 1st of July position. Thank you.
And because we need to get just a few more questions in, and probably we'll skip to the police
Okay,
ones, I think.
that's fine.
But
Chair,
just
thank you.
quickly, there was an action plan to be shared with staff regarding working culture in the ambulance service. So have there been results following that process?
Yes, so we've had a consultation with staff and external company who have been brought in to work with the senior management team, and all colleagues were invited to engage with that. This has resulted in the development of a staff charter, setting out the standards of the organisation in improving that culture and working arrangements between the management team and the operational staff. We've already seen significant delivery against key elements of that, and starting to look at the development of people and culture plans, communication plans, as well as how we start to incorporate operational staff into some of the decision making for the service, so they feel part of that. So there has been some significant delivery. The plan is ongoing, due for review, as was the agreements of the meetings that were held, and that's due to take place in the next month or so, I believe. So we should have then a review of where we are, take stock, and then move forward. The action plans that relate to the various different reviews through the Association of Chief Ambulance Executives is being constantly monitored, and we are delivering against the key elements of that, which is seeing policy provision, some of the new staffing roles that we have to support the governance framework within the ambulance service, and we're seeing real demonstrable change and delivery in line with certainly key elements of instant reporting and response and recovery and learning from those as well.
Okay, thank you. And I'm wondering, Deputy Porre, if we could skip to question 39.
Indeed, I can.
Yeah.
So, and this is regarding to the police. The Policing Plan 25-2028 identifies the need for targeted interventions and early support to tackle youth crime. How will you ensure these needs are embedded across all working groups, and this will feed back into the work of the Youth Justice roadmap? Sorry.
That to me, is it?
Yeah.
I'm delighted with the Youth Justice Roadmap. I think it's long overdue. I think there has been an awful lot of people trying to get that off the ground or on the road, as it were, where we can work together with all agencies. I have been to this panel before, and I've been in other places where I think youth crime is too high here in Jersey. And it is often committed by a very small group. And I've said here before, 10 young people commit 10% of total crime in Jersey. That's a consistent theme year on year. And therefore, we need better ways to divert young people away from crime. So, and that shouldn't be about criminalising. I take the view that we are criminalising children because in the absence of anything else that delivers the deterrent and the appropriate consequences. What I think the roadmap provides us is the opportunity to take different routes. As Deputy Miles knows, I'm a very, very strong supporter of the parish hall inquiry process because that does not criminalise children, but often, exclusively actually, the children that we are dealing with on an almost daily basis, they are far beyond a parish hall inquiry process. That has long been used, and therefore we go into the criminal justice system. So what we need is other methods, other avenues, which doesn't necessarily take them into the criminal justice system per se, but diverts young people from crime. I take the view, a strong view, that there is still an absence of deterrent and consequences. And my hope is the roadmap, working with other agencies, including people in children's services and other government agencies and those charities, that we can work together to divert young people. I should say, this is my final point, is there's 18,000 children in this island. 18,000 children hardly ever come into contact with any of the agencies, including the police. But we have a small and enduring cohort year on year. Clearly that cohort changes of between sort of 10 and 15 children, which the systems, processes, policies and procedures currently do not deal with, hence the reason why we needed a roadmap like this.
Yeah. Would you like me to carry on?
Yes,
or-
please.
Okay. So, can you please outline where police responsibilities should lie in dealing with criminal versus non-criminal work? I'm sure you've mentioned that before in the previous panels, but
Yes,
Could you-
it won't surprise, I don't think, the panel members and other members in this meeting today, but it might others that are watching and listening. Around about 80 to 85% of what the police do, it is, well, around 15% of what the police do is what probably islanders think the police should do. That's responding to criminal activity, arresting people who commit crime, dealing with road traffic collisions, which we've already discussed about. About 80% of what we do is not a criminal matter. It is part of a very significant demand, and I've come here before and talked about demand placed by mental health incidents. I've just checked, there's already been 4 mental health related incidents already in the last 24 hours. That's not unusual. Civil matters, there's been 3 that's been described as civil matters. We have approximately 6 concern for welfare calls every 24 hours. And that means around about 2,500 concern for welfare, which is a catch-all phrase, where actually what we should be doing is directing those people calling us. Sometimes, rather unfairly, I've described the control centre that we have, joint one, is almost like the island's call handling centre, or the island's call centre, because we are called, particularly at weekends. That's a slight exaggeration, but it's there just to illustrate the point. So what we are keen to do through the introduction of Right Care, Right Person, which has been adopted by all UK forces, first introduced by Humberside in 2019, now across all forces, including the Metropolitan forces, is working very, very closely with our partners, particularly in health, to work out what is the right care, for the right person for the right care. And often that is related to mental health type matters, where it is actually not appropriate for a police officer to turn up if someone is in mental health crisis. There is still a shift in mindset that, for example, if someone was walking across in the Royal Square today and they grabbed their chest, they hopefully would call these good people on my right. But when people are having a mental health crisis, still a medical matter, which doesn't involve any violence, and of course we would be very keen to be part of that, they often call the police. And so we will be working together with all our agencies, including health, to look at how we can best make sure that there is the right care for the right person.
thank you for your answer. So, Minister, regarding the criminal work and non-criminal work, what role does the Justice and Home Affairs play in determining who has responsibility for the different events, and should be there interventions if non-criminal cases are utilising considerably police resources?
I think, as the Chief of Police has said, quite often, depending on sort of time of day and when somebody's in crisis, it is quite often the police that they call. And I think by introducing this thing that this Right Care, Right Person scheme, which they've had running in the UK, what that means is that, yes, they may still call the police. However, the police then hopefully won't have to be deployed, because then what will happen is that there'll be an ability to have very close links with mental health services and be able to call out mental health services. And that is all part and parcel of the ongoing work. It's the same as, it might be an ambulance matter or another matter, but it is about actually, when you get that call, how you actually manage it. And it's about having that ability and working with other agencies to be able to call those other agencies for them to go and deal with it as opposed to yourselves. And I think that's what it is. It's about actually managing that. I'm not sure you'll ever get to a position where people don't automatically ring the police, particularly if it's 2-3 o'clock in the morning, because they won't necessarily think about where's the number for emergency mental health care, but they will be ringing the police. So I think the thing is it's about us working very closely with other agencies. That means that those calls, yes, they may be taken by SOJP, but then it won't be SOJP resources that will then ultimately actually being sent to those matters. And I think that's, or if they are initially sent, but you will have already started the process so that that person can then be actually dealt with quicker in the other service. I think that's probably a good way of describing it.
Thank you, Minister.
Okay, you have another question, I think?
Yeah, I'll go. My last one. Again, this may be for Robin here. Can you please outline the process for fundings of laptops for honorary police from the Criminal Offences Confiscation Fund, and if this is an ongoing arrangement?
I can answer that question, unless you wanted to, Minister, but I can.
The laptops. They've all got the laptops.
Okay.
But we were asking if it's an ongoing.
If it's an ongoing arrangement as well.
Is that done and dusted, or?
Well, I think the thing.
We've got them and we've paid for them. It's just any upgrades or anything that
I think
subsequent centennials.
What I would suggest is that they've all got new laptops. I would suggest in 3 or 4 years' time, or in my case, I've had mine for 7 years. When they need a new one, I would assume that the funding will be looked at again, because at this moment in time, I can say that we haven't got, SOJPs certainly haven't got the funding, and so I think it will be something that when they're needed again in the future, that there'll be it needs to be looked at as how we're going to fund the honorary police and Tetra and everything else, because it's an ongoing thing. But I think we've resolved one problem. We're going to have a look to see how you do it on a long-term basis, because obviously it doesn't really sit necessarily here, but we need to look at it as to who and how it's going to be funded.
I think that's absolutely right, Minister, and I think there is a wider issue for not necessarily for scrutiny just now, but I'm delighted that our honorary officers, our honorary colleagues have got these laptops, but it came from criminal confiscated money, and I think the value that they provide. We've got Liberation Day coming up, royal visits. Our honorary police colleagues provide an enormous amount that would cost government and the island a lot, hundreds of thousands of pounds, I would suggest. So there is a further discussion which I've had with João Camara as the chef from St Peter and Michelle about how they could seek funding on a more sustainable basis rather than having to go this. Now, I appreciate money is tight and all the rest of it, but those discussions, which we can then share with the Minister, can go on. I don't think it's necessarily appropriate for something like this to necessarily always go into criminal confiscation, because that is not a bottomless pit.
Okay.
Yes, and we don't want criminals to exist for that.
Just very, very last question, really. It was just the takeaways from the collision and casualty reduction plan. And it was just to wonder whether what areas of improvement have been identified for collaboration between Justice and Home Affairs and Infrastructure and Health and Social Services that have come out of that plan.
I think it's a thing that we've going to have to sort of meet on, I think, from the point of view. We've obviously had discussions about it, but obviously in relation to the plan, there needs to be a lot of work. Need to be a lot of police intervention in relation to the implementation of speeding and all of those other things in relation to the plan. We've also, all of us, been met with potential for support for, and you might have heard it on the radio, for a charity that's in the UK that's keen to come to Jersey. So we've all met with them as well. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. I think we need to sort of all get down together and start to actually work out what we're going to do. Obviously, there's been a lot of road improvements across the north of the island, St Martin's, St John's, St Mary's, St Peter's.
Definition of improvement.
All improvements in relation to the reductions of speeds across the island. So I think there's still a lot of work to do in relation to that particular plan.
Does the chief want to say something?
Sorry, do you want me to just add to that?
Yeah.
The collision and casualty reduction plan is divided up into about 6 elements. I don't think I've ever seen such a comprehensive plan in my tenure, where it involves government. And where I'm really encouraged is, and as I've said at this meeting, we will not make road users safer by enforcement alone. That's myself and our honorary colleagues.
Behaviour.
And they were out this morning, actually in a parish you may know.
Not a million miles away.
Yes. So they do that, and they do that on a regular basis. But this is the first comprehensive plan, the safe system approach, which we've already discussed. Again, collaboration across government portfolios, looking at vulnerable road users, that's cyclists and motorcyclists, and a cultural shift towards shared responsibility, which is a key part of the plan. And that's where I think is the real strength.
Yeah.
And just quickly, this was one of Helen's questions, but I couldn't find it for a minute. Was any update on the speed check equipment?
It is still being built, I believe, in Sweden. It will not surprise panel members that we asked that question before we arrived, anticipating it. So we're in the hands of others, but when we get it, I'm sure we'll let you know.
Okay.
The legalities.
I think you said it was in Australia and America last year,
Is
so
it?
it's
Yeah.
spread to Scandinavia.
Yes, it's a worldwide effort.
Good luck with it.
All right, well, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. And we have got more questions, but we'll send them on to you if
That's
you
fine.
answer in writing. Okay.
And well done, the 2 newbies. Well done, Gordon.